Welcome, everybody. My name is Paul Willis, and tonight I'm going to be your host, and I'm really excited about it. Welcome to the Young Laureates. And it's an interview series and conversations with Poet Laureates from all up and down California and across the country. And typically, your host is going to be Andru Defeye, but tonight, since he's our guest, it's me. So what's up? I'm really excited to be here with y'all. I wanted to kind of give a little context and a little bit of the framing for why this kind of thing is important. Um, so as we know that there's this, renaissance, this youth movement of poetry that's been happening. I personally believe it was really defined um, by the introduction and influence of Def Jam's Def Poetry Jam on HBO, and the influence of seeing spoken word artists who were really diverse and from communities all over the country, really all over the world. I think influenced this new generation of poets in really powerful ways. So I'm excited that this series is going to spotlight some of those poets who are really groundbreaking artists, people who are really making a difference in their community, and people who are helping to elevate these voices that we don't typically get a chance to hear from. So that's the work, and just really excited to share that. One of our sponsors for this work is the Sacramento Bee and the Equity Lab in particular. And I want to give them major props because they're really doing something that the Bee hasn't done in its 180 plus year history, right? They are elevating the voices of marginalized communities, of communities who were typically not represented in the Sacramento media. They did a source audit last year, um, and they shared some of the results with us over at Soul Collective. And part of what the Sacramento Bee found was that 85% of their stories that they were writing, the subject of those stories and the sources who were being interviewed for those stories were white. And then about 2/3 of that 85% were white men. So you know that Sacramento is one of the most diverse cities in the entire country, but this is an opportunity really for the Bee to acknowledge those places where they've misstepped and gone wrong and misrepresented, and an opportunity for them to flip that narrative. So the Equity Lab was established as an opportunity to dedicate reporters to these specific communities. So we have a Black communities reporter, Latino and Latinx communities reporter, and an Asian Pacific Islander, reporter, and that's super dope. There's also a reporter that's dedicated specifically to covering equity issues, just in general here in Sacramento. And these are all, young folks that you've read their stories, you've been impacted by their work. So that's a really incredible thing. The managing editor for the Equity Lab, her name is Kiana Williamson. She's a Black woman. She's from Sacramento, from Oak Park. What represent? And she's really leading the effort. I think that it's really important to recognize kind of Black women and their contributions in this fight towards equity and justice. She's one of those major players. Went to Howard University. So shout out to all my HBCUs before working at the New York Times and specifically on the 1619 project before coming back home to contribute to this effort here. So really excited for Kiana and for Kiana's team over there at the Bee, excited for the Equity Lab, and even more so for all of you who are out there who are aspiring writers. I hope that you really gain a lot from these interviews and these conversations and are inspired to share your voice with us because it's needed. Even when everything in our society on social media might tell you that your voice doesn't matter, it's not as important, it is really important. And you'll learn from this interview tonight with Andru Defeye about the platforms that he's created, the artists who's helped uplift, the communities that he supported through his work before he was the Poet Laureate, and then really what he's doing now. So I'm really excited to introduce you all to our guest, my brother. Andru Defeye.
The poem is called The Little Wayne Affirmation. Cash money millionaires weren't when they named themselves.
What's up, my guy?
Hey, what it is.
Man,
I'm so excited, man, that you are allowing me to interview you. I know most of the time you're on the flip side of this conversation. So
it's a little scary. It's a little scary to have someone who's been with you through all of these things. You know what I mean? There's some wild stories that I know you could tell. So we're going to have some fun tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I think when we first met, it was through the open mics over at Soul Collective. And I think a lot of people kind of knew you as like the open mic guy, right? The MC, the host. Some people knew you as a journalist a little bit, but I kind of want to go back to the beginning. I know a little bit about your personal story. I know where you're from, but for those people who are meeting you for the first time, can you share a little bit about where you grew up, what that community was like, and really how that motivated you to start writing in the first place?
Word, yeah. I mean, we could just start it off with, I'm a miracle. I'm a walking miracle. I was born with a condition called Eagle-Barrett syndrome, otherwise known as prune belly syndrome, super rare. Basically, it means I was born without stomach muscles. Pause for a second. Think about everything that requires stomach muscles to do. That's sitting, walking, everything. Doctors told me my entire life that I wouldn't walk, that I wouldn't live past my teenage years. Doctors had a lot of things to say, and I just never listened to any of them. It's been zero forbidden goals on mine for forever. The medical trauma and just all of the issues that I had to face as a young kid really drove me to a wild, depressive place. I tell folks all the time, my first poem was a suicide note. And it was so good that I was like, oh, I can't leave yet. I'm not done yet. Like this writing thing, it was the first thing that I ever felt like I was really good at. When you're in the depths of those kind of emotions, you learn how to communicate them, even if it's only with yourself. So I definitely tapped in early to all of that. And that kind of drives just like my belief that everything is possible, that there's nothing you can't do. Right. So that's what really drives my poetry to this day, is wanting to instill in people like that belief that you can do whatever you want to and whatever you set your mind to. And I think early on, that kind of trauma and that kind of pain really helped me later on relate to other folks who were going through different kinds of trauma and different kinds of pain, but relating on a traumatized level to folks like from a very, very early age.
Yeah, I think it's important that we start there, because your story is one of resistance and resiliency, right? And when I think about all of the different ways that shows up in your writing, it's very clear how those things are connected. There's a story, man, about you in high school, and it's funny because we've done some of that work with some administrators from your area around treatment of students around kind of race and class and gender and that kind of thing. But there was one teacher in particular who kind of stuck out to you, who encouraged you to keep going. Could you share a little bit about what that experience was like?
Yeah, shout out to Virgil Doogie. I tell people all the time that teachers are so important, and you may not think you're making a difference, especially to those troublesome kids. Like I was one of those troublesome kids. And if you ask Mr. Doogie, I'm sure he would have been like, I definitely didn't get through that one. Like he's just hard-headed, but there was a moment. I always tell kids, I ended up in continuation school because I interrupted class and I wrote poetry. Those were the two things that I did. And now those are two of the ways that I pay my bills. You know what I mean? So that's really all I was doing back then. And Mr. Doogie, it was my newspaper class. Go figure. You know, I would turn into a journalist years later, but at the time I wasn't interested at all. And Mr. Doogie came over and he asked me what I was writing and if he could read it. And I said, hell no, you can't read this. This is my unabridged personal journal. Like, I figured he would get me in trouble like all the rest of the adults in my life. And he said, look, I'm not going to get you in trouble. I just want to know what you're writing, and I'll give you some credits for it. And he gave me some credits for it. So I let him. And then it came back the next day. My poetry book came back, and it had a bunch of his poetry shoved into the book. And this was poetry that was really sensitive about some things that were going on in his life that he shouldn't have been talking to students about, frankly. You know what I mean? But because he treated me like an adult and because he found that common ground, he was able to reach me in a way that no one ever reached me. You know, he was the one who said, this is what you're doing is poetry. He's the one who introduced me to the Outlaw Bible of American Poetry, which is a book that changed my entire life. You know, he introduced me to incredible poets. He's the one who gamed me up on all of this. He's the one who taught me about poet laureates. It was him. It was like, there's a thing called poet laureates. And I was like, I'm going to be that. You know, so all it does take is one teacher really taking an interest in meeting a kid where they're at and not, you know, trying to get them to where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And we've definitely, you know, we work in a lot of those spaces now. We work in those continuation school spaces. One of the cool things for me, you know, COVID messed it up, but one of my first plans as poet laureate was I was going to go back to that continuation school, and I was just going to buy a bunch of cake and a bunch of snacks and like throw a party. Like, why are we throwing a party? We didn't do it. Nah, because I want y'all to celebrate because we won. Because kids who they put in over here and say, you don't belong over here, you know, kids they said wouldn't be something, we won. You know what I mean? This is our season right now. So, you know, and then going back to the high school that kicked me out, the traditional high school that kicked me out, and being able to talk to them about, you know, the way that, especially a lot of my friends of color who ended up over at the continuation school, you know, they tried to keep me, they tried to get me to stay at the regular school. They didn't do that with any of my friends of color. So, you know, it was early that I noticed the difference in how we were treated. And it's been really dope to be able to go back and not only work with the school systems in Sacramento, but also work with some of the school systems that I came up in.
Right. So that teacher was a really dope mentor in your life. And I know that you do a lot of mentoring right now. But when you were coming up and you left high school, I think that you found some of that mentorship and guidance on your journey to Sacramento. Can you talk about what it was like to kind of end up here in Sacramento from where you were from? I know you spent some time out in the Bay, kind of doing your thing, pursuing a budding career as a rapper before coming here to Sacramento, and then finding some of your mentorship here. You talk a little bit about just that journey and who some of those mentors are for you here in Sacramento, what they mean to you.
Yeah, man. I used to be a rapper, man. Some people will still tell you that I am. Your iTunes and Google Play will still tell you that I am. But you know, my early 20s. You know, it was all rap. It was pursuing that dream of being a full-time musician. And I did it for a while. You know, it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. For me, the life led to, and I want to go a little farther back too, because I think a lot of times, drug addiction and that kind of thing, exposure to drugs, people relate it back to rock and roll and the lifestyle and all of that, where I think the deeper issue is a lack of self-love and a lack of self-confidence, right? A lot of times people use this entertainment as a way to nurse their ego and to feed their ego to make up for a lack of confidence and self-love. And in my case, that's definitely what that was. I hadn't learned to love myself yet. And it wouldn't be another 15 years before I really figured that out. You know what I mean? So So for me, I get pretty deep into the drugs and the alcohol and just the nightlife and the lifestyle. And at a certain point, someone's told me, "Yo, you're gonna die out there," you know. And that person was in Sacramento, so I came to stay with them. And here through like the most random set of circumstances and dots being connected, I end up meeting this brother named Anand, who he was a DJ, but he was working on this project called Soul Collective. It was like this non-profit thing, and they had a space, but then it burned down, so they didn't have a space, and they were trying to just figure it out. And we really bonded over hip hop music, and then that turns into, you know, bonding over a whole lot more, just as far as, you know, the culture we wanted to see in the world, you know what I mean? And the ways that some of the political systems were treating folks. And so, you know, that's where I meet Anand. Through Anand, I meet Estella. Through them, I meet Dom, and I meet Eli and Khalil, and just everyone that comes with the Soul Collective family. And these people had this light and this love that I didn't understand where they had it, where they got it from. You know what I mean? It was a similar light to the light that my parents have, you know what I mean? But like, it wasn't the church, right? And then getting to know them and finding Soul Collective and really, you know, for me, that was the turnaround. I tell people I didn't, you know, I went to the program for a while as far as like 12 steps, but my real recovery happened at Soul Collective because I found my purpose. You know, I found things to love about myself when I started giving back to the community. So, you know, Soul Collective saved my life. Soul Collective saved my life. That can never be understated. You know, and I'd like to think after, you know, 11 coming up on 12 years being involved with the crew that, you know, I've returned the favor and saved a couple of lives myself. So, you know, but those folks are by far like the real mentors, the first real mentors that I had, you know. And then come folks like Jay Sales. You know what I mean? I'd never seen an older white man use his privilege and understand his privilege and hold himself accountable in the way that I saw Uncle Jay do. You know, that also, that crew leads me to Sean Berner, who is only a few years older than me, but that's the big brother that I never had, and that I always wanted. So there's definitely, you know, like a lot of mentors around this city, down to, you know, Devin I. Evans of the Whalers, Stan Padilla of the RCAF. Like, there's some real giants whose shoulders I stand on, and that can never be understated. And that's why I work to be a mentor, is because I was blessed so hardy by mentors out here.
Yeah, no, it's dope because I think that there was this missing generation of mentorship, right? Like, coming up, we didn't have a ton of those folks in the hip hop space, right? I was born in '87, so you know, you think about this whole generation of kids who were latchkey kids, taking care of their, you know, younger brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews, but you know, they didn't always have some of that guidance there for them. And we had to find that. We had to seek that out in community. So I see you do this work, right? In the community. We met through Soul Collective, and kind of like how you shared that you bonded with Anand and Estelle and Dom and everybody, was more than just music. Like, we met through the open mic first, and crazy set of circumstances that led me to Soul Collective, right? We don't have to get into that. It's not my interview, but but I think about the open mic space and how beautiful it was to walk into a room. You had rappers, acoustic singer-songwriters, sometimes opera singers, sometimes, you know what I mean, people who were producers, producing some of the strangest beats you ever heard. That's the first time I met Stevante, was through the open mic, right?
Back before we knew his name was Stevante.
Right. He was Pharaoh. Still is, you know what I mean? But it's just one of those things that, you think about that time, right? 2012, 2013, and then 2014, where there was this energy at Soul Collect. I think we had maybe like 80 to 85 people at the open mic kind of week to week. And there was a point where we had to transition out of Soul Collective to start to find a new space. Um, and before we hit up the city, guerrilla art flash mobs and the whole nine, you almost walked away at that point. And I remember kind of sitting with you in the car. But I really would want you to tell this story because I perceived it in a certain way. You, I know, kind of took it a different way, but can you share about that moment where you decided that like you wanted to commit to being here in Sacramento and building something even greater than what you had experienced to date?
I mean, you real nice talking about like when I decided to commit, because y'all ain't leave me no choice but to commit. But that's what good homies do. And on some real, like, anybody who enjoys my art or what I've brought to Sacramento since 2013, y'all owe Paul Willis and Alex Amaya thank you, because there was a night in my car where we the thing was someone had lit off a firework at Soul Collective. Some of the neighbors had gotten mad. It was out of control, and it was because I hadn't learned organizing yet and delegating yet. So it was me trying to run this open mic of 100 people, and a bunch of them are just wild kids who need somewhere to go. You know what I mean? Like, they're gonna do wild things. No one was bad. No one was like, they were just doing wild kid stuff. You know what I mean? But when we were told we couldn't do it at that venue anymore, I sat in, you remember, I sat in the car and I was like, I'm done here. This city has nothing for me. I'm going to go to back to SF. I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to go to LA. Like, I'm out of here, dude. Like, I'm trying to build something, and I just got shut down after years. Like, that open mic started in 2010, I think. And we've been going every week for a year or two, just like building this thing up. And it was y'all that were like, yo, like, you can cry, you can be sad, you can be angry, I think Alex said you could hit me if you want to, but you can't quit. You're not supposed to quit. So it was the homies that really pulled me and were like, yo, like, you can't stop. So get yourself some friends like that, in the midst of it, and we'll let you feel what you feel and tell you is valid, but also like, yo, you can't quit. That's really funny. My guy Trey right here. Trey was who I lived above Trey when I first moved to Sacramento. Trey knows pre-Soul Collective. Like, he knew me when I was in it. So that's wild. What up, Trey? Made it out the other side. And he'd tell you that I told him when I started to get my life together, like, I'm going to do this, and this. Watch. And I did all of it. You know what I mean? But yeah, get yourself some good homies. And then that leads to doing the guerrilla art stuff. Because y'all wouldn't let me quit, it became, yo, what are we going to do different? And I'd had this idea, I came from, and let me never portray it like this came out of the blue, out of my head. Like, nothing is new under the sun. I came from San Francisco, where on Thursday nights at 16th and Mission, they do the wildest open air open mic. It was guerrilla style before there was guerrilla style. You jumped in the middle, and if it was your turn to go, then you jumped in the middle. And if you and someone else jumped in, then you went at the same time until you decided whose turn it really was. Like, and for me, that was something I'd always wanted to kind of recreate and bring that energy to Sacramento. I really felt like it was missing that energy of the street corner. That's where I really learned to perform. We used to stand on the street corners and perform for like, yo, you can either like buy this CD or you can punch me in the stomach if it's whack. You know what I mean? So we cut our teeth out there, and that was something I wanted to bring to the city. And then, you know, being without a venue really kind of gave us that opportunity to get guerrilla with it. 2014 January.
So I remember when we were brainstorming, like, oh, well, maybe we can go here. Maybe we can try this spot. You know, this place is super open. You know, they don't have nothing going on a Monday night. Maybe they'll be open to it. And we literally like walked or like hit up all these different establishments in Midtown, and a bunch of places turned us away when they found out that we also had hip hop at our open mics. You know what
And
I
it was
mean?
only hip hop.
Yeah, they were cool. They were like, yeah, like singer-songwriters, cool, producers, great, DJ, yeah. Bring them into hip hop. Nah,
Yeah, we
we
don't
don't
do
do
hip
hip
hop
hop.
here.
We had one place tell us we only do acoustic open mics. And I was like, well, I'm a hip hop artist and I could do acoustic versions of my songs. Like,
Think we can't rap over guitars, bro?
and we hit up Slice of Broadway first. Probably had maybe like 60 something people at Slice of Broadway, and then 75 people at Jimmy's Hair Garage in Midtown, and then 150 people at La Garnacha, and over 200 people on the porch at Lowbrow. And there were no flyers. There were no, you know, nothing posted on social media. It was this word of mouth thing. So can you talk about what it was like to see that community and movement grow, knowing that you probably had hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations with not just artists, but people to come out who want to support the arts during that time? Can you like talk about what it was like to kind of build a movement and a community of folks? I know that you weren't the only person doing it, but you know, as kind of the face of the movement, you know what I mean? Can you talk about what that was like?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, it always goes with saying that anything that I did as with ZFG is a collective effort. You know what I'm saying? I always tell folks, like, if it wasn't for y'all, like, it would just be me yelling on a corner to myself, which would just get the cops called on me. You know what I'm saying? Like, that it wouldn't be a movement, it wouldn't turn into an event. But back then, man, like, you know, and it's wild because you never know that the glory days are the glory days. You know what I mean? I was just talking to someone about that the other day where I'm like, yo, right now is the glory days though, fam. But back then, like, that was just such a wild energy. And it was so, you know, if y'all know me, and for those of you who don't, I thrive in chaos. I love me some chaos. And that's exactly what those times were. We didn't necessarily know what we were doing. All we knew was if there was a critical mass of people that we had to bring. And if we brought this number of people to this venue, they would probably be okay with us being there and turning it into an open mic that night because their business would do well. Right. So it was just this balancing act of like, how do we make sure that we're getting enough people out? So Slice of Broadway was such a lift of like having to call everyone personally and let them know what we're doing and just how to even like interact with this new experience, because it was something like the city had never seen before. And once people kind of get to interact with that the first time and we make the video, that's what really did it for us, were these videos, because, you know, there were 50 people the first night, but that video got shared something wild, like 100+ times, because folks were like, this is what's going on in Sacramento. Did you know about, who knew about this? Like, so it turned into this like really wild, like, what is this? And it had this real curiosity factor to it that drew people in and just continued to grow to the point where, like, you know, we got to La Garnacha with 150 people and we're like, there's nowhere else to even go in the city that's big enough to hold this kind of crowd. So we think of the lowbrow porch, but that literally is it. That's like where we can think of, especially in the Midtown area, to set up that can even hold that many people. And we're afraid that like we're gonna keep growing and pull these, like, what do you do with 300 people in Midtown? I mean, it got to where the night at Lowbrow, the police came up and The police pulled up with hands on their guns because there were 200 people on the porch yelling and screaming, and they didn't know what was going on. So I had to jump over chairs and tables and like cut them off. And they immediately, what's going on here? So, poetry, officer. You got some bars for us? You got something you want to share? You know, and it was just, that was so wild and so big. Yeah, man, like that changed everything for us.
And you got your unofficial
we got some
street
veterans
title that night.
Yeah,
do you remember what that was?
Man, that, of course I remember what that was, fam. Like that was I got up on the table that night, as is my custom, to start these events. And I've taken a little bit of heat. People say I'm sensationalist because I stand on tables or I jump up on chairs. Listen, I challenge you to get 200 people's attention without a microphone. You know what I'm saying? So I just jumped up on the table and I'm getting everyone's attention. And someone yelled out, "That's the Guerrilla Poet Laureate of Sacramento." And I was like, oh, I will take that. That is going with me. Because again, you know, it was always a life goal of mine to be a poet laureate. You know, it wasn't anything that I thought would happen anytime soon. You know what I mean? At that point, I wasn't sure that it would ever happen. I thought that was probably the closest I'd ever get to being an actual poet laureate, to be like, yo, I'm a guerrilla poet laureate. The streets gave me that title. And that's what, you know, the actual title is beautiful, and I appreciate the people who gave it to me, but it will never mean what the title of Guerrilla Poet Laureate meant, because that was given to me by the people. You know what I mean? There isn't, you know, until the people yell out that there's a new Guerrilla Poet Laureate, I don't got to give that title up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and that's a point I think I'd like to pause for folks, because you don't understand like the level of respect that people have to have for you to give you like a nickname, right? So to then have a title like that's that dude, you know, is huge, because you know you have a large number of artists all gathered in one space. But then it wasn't just artists, right? There are people who were there. They're like, yo, I just came to Lowbrow to eat. Like, have a drink. I didn't expect this to happen, but then they were fully engaged, because
folks came for a beer and got slapped with poetry. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it really started to shift some of the conversations that were happening in the city. I think when people started to recognize you as like, yo, you're that guy, then there were opportunities to kind of build upon that, right? It wasn't just like, yo, I'm that guy that just stands on chairs and yells poems. Like, no, like when you think about everything that you had gone through, then you're talking about mentorship, you're talking about community building, you're talking about elevating the level of performance art here in the city. There was a night after a Nipsey Hussle concert, and I think there was like a shooting or a stabbing. It was like in a parking lot, like kind of across the way from the venue. It had nothing to do with the artist who was on stage or anything like that. It was just some random kind of act of violence, but then hip hop got blamed for that. And I know that there's some OGs in Sacramento who had the whole kind of Sac hates hip hop campaign, and you know they were kind of already hip to that. But instead of kind of piling on with some of those words and that kind of movement, you decided to do something different with our crew, and we decided to stage a protest. Can you talk about the protest open mic at Cesar Chavez Plaza, and just that experience? Because there's some cool tie-ins for some stuff we'll cover later. But can you talk about what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's something that happens over and over again. You've already heard a couple instances of it just in the ZFG story and in my personal story, where, you know, hip hop as a whole catches this reputation. And let's be perfectly clear about it. My skin tone is what it is, but hip hop is a Black art form. You know what I'm saying? So to have these ideas and these beliefs about hip hop, it's just prejudice. You know what I mean? It's just racism and prejudice. And when there was the shooting after the Nipsey Hussle concert, and it was like hip hop show gets shot, and it was like, yo, this was a gang affiliated issue. This wasn't hip hop culture. You know what I mean? It didn't even really have to do with Nipsey. You know what I mean? Like, if you really study Nipsey's message, that wasn't what he was calling for. You know what I mean? So as hip hop starts to come under attack, you know, clubs are not booking hip hop. They're, you know, we're getting a citywide ban on hip hop. The clubs aren't doing any more hip hop shows. People are scared of hip hop. And so we decide to take this flash mob idea, and we're going to go set up at Cesar Chavez Park, right in the middle of downtown. It's right across from City Hall. I've always felt, you know, they had this big concrete stage that's beautiful, that the people aren't really allowed to use, you know what I mean, unless we get permits and pay for it. So it felt like, and it's just in the legacy, you know what I mean? It's Cesar Chavez Park. This is someone who, you know, was consistently protesting for the people and for the rights of the people. So, you know, we took it to Cesar Chavez Park. The first night we had 2 cop cars on each side of the park and multiple news outlets that were out there. Nobody bothered us. We did 2 hours of open mic with poets, comedians, singers, people jamming, people letting out a joyful noise. The second week, we had 1 cop car on each side of the park, so it thinned out a little bit, and we had a couple of media outlets with us, including Ryan Lillis, a young Ryan Lillis that we would meet, who is now the associate editor at the Bee, and he was a journalist at that time, and so we meet him and get to build with him. And the third week was the week that journalists didn't show up and no media showed up and only the police showed up, and they told us that we needed to leave or we were facing arrest. We were there unlawfully. And you know, folks brought it up. They're like, we've been here. This is our 3rd week here and you haven't done anything to us these other 2 weeks. What's the difference? And they said, you don't have media with you this time. They were very clear about it. So, you know, it was also just a very interesting time in the city. You know, we've made a lot of headway just even in like performing in public spaces. That was something that wasn't really allowed back then either. So we were kind of breaking a couple different rules to make our point. And, you know, nobody ended up getting arrested. We made a very good counterpoint, and we had a lot of media that covered us making that counterpoint about hip hop being positive and for the community and for all ages. So, you know, man, like that changed everything and really shifted the culture of that conversation. I think people understood that there was now a collective in the city that was going to be loud about some of these things, especially when it came to hip hop culture and the racist practice of trying to keep hip hop culture out of certain places. So yeah, man, that was some wild times, man. People almost got hemmed up for the arts. And you know, if you know, I tell folks like that's how down this crew is. That's how I know that I trust my people, because folks were ready to get arrested for the art, you know, and pretty much like if you're gonna roll around with us, like you kind of have to be ready to get arrested for the art. It's kind of a prerequisite, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's wild, man, because I think about that particular point, and when we realized that, you know, we had the eyes of the city on this crew, like it was pretty special, I think, in that way.
Gabriel says they're just interviews. I thought it was going to be poetry. We are going to get to some poetry for you, Gabriel.
Oh yeah,
stick with us.
We're gonna get there. This is all background information. You know what I mean? It's hard to know where you're going unless you know where you came from, Gabriel. You know, this is that Sankofa right here. So All right. We realized at that point in time that there was a lot of eyes, a lot of attention, right? Media who were interested in writing stories and covering, this kind of arts movement. We were performing in public spaces, so the business community was well aware that at any given night, you don't know when, but you could have this like performance art flash mob pop up in your spot, and you just
Right.
got to be on your toes, and ready to handle that. Um, you were in the middle of an album. Like I remember this album because it was dope. And you decided to not put it out. And I remember kind of like I used every trick in the book to get you to drop this thing. But you ultimately decided not to. And can you talk about why? And I think that, Gabriel and everyone else is like, let's get to the poetry part of this. I think for me, kind of after the protest stuff, after we realized like how impactful we were being in the city, that there was a shift for you that the rest of us could see in terms of your intention and what you wanted to put out there. And you didn't drop this rap album. I'll let you share the name, but you didn't drop this rap album and you decided to go in a different direction. Can you talk a little bit more about that moment in time? It wasn't just a single day. It's probably maybe like 8 to 12 month period where you were
Yeah.
kind of going back and forth,
Yeah.
but you decided to go a different direction. Why was that?
So, in hip hop, this is a warrior sport. You know what I mean? It's a very competitive sport. And I'm a very competitive person. You know what I mean? And I got into the art for that. I love slam poetry for that reason. I got battle roots. So I'd been, as we were doing what we were doing in the city, we were doing a lot of things that people hadn't done before, right? Or that people hadn't seen done before, or we were doing it in ways that people hadn't seen it before. And we were garnering a lot of hate. And I use that in the most hip hop terminology, right? Like we were gathering a little bit of hate from other crews, from other folks, from just like seeing, you know what I mean? And I don't even blame folks, right? It wasn't anything they did. It was the culture of the city said that there's only so much, right? There's only so much love. There's only so much shine. There's only so much props. And it left people really feeling like there was only so much to go around. So we beefed a lot amongst crews. And what would be weird is like when you weren't even beefing with people, but you would hear that you were. So it would be kind of crazy. And so, I used to get a lot of that out in my music. I'm a rapper, and this is a warrior sport again. So all of my vitriol went to these records and this album, and this album was called The Villain Album. And the idea behind that was like, yo, if y'all want to call me a villain, then I'll be a villain, and I'll be the best villain that you've ever seen in your life. Like I'll be a super villain out here. I'll turn into Lex Luthor on you just because y'all called me a villain. And it was that like 12 months of really looking at like, yo, we've got so many eyes on us, and I've got so many young people looking at me as a lyricist, as a voice in the city, that if they hear this album come out while they've got their eyes on me, it's going to really negate some of this love energy that I'm pushing out into the city when they hear me doing diss songs over this and that, over things that like really weren't too big in the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean? This is rap beef. This is so and so said that they're a better rapper than me. So I definitely like, it was rough shelving that album because me and Alien Logic, shout out to him, worked really hard on that album. And like you said, it was really good. It's still a quality album. It still holds up when you listen to it. And maybe someday that'll come out as like, yo, that was this part of my life. But at the time, it just wasn't a good look for the city. It wasn't anything that was going to really enrich the city. And we were on this trajectory to really make a difference and change the culture. And as soon as I realized like, yo, we can really change the culture here, was when it was like, yo, I got to start being a little bit more responsible for what comes out of my mouth and the energy that I'm putting out. Not that I need to be inauthentic ever, but just that I need to be aware of who's looking and who's watching, because there are a lot of young people who look up to us, you know, and that was something new for me. You know what I mean? Like I said, I was a junkie, so I wasn't used to people looking up to me. So, you know, it took me a little bit to like to reckon with that.
Yeah. So it's crazy, because then I feel like for me, as a friend and as an outsider kind of looking in, it seemed like you turned to poetry even more so then. And not necessarily to like negate any stuff that you were doing as a rapper, because you were still doing features for people. You did features for me, right? And things like that. But it seemed like poetry became a different kind of outlet to express like new ideas and thoughts and feelings and the whole nine. There were still kind of community organizing things that you were doing. Um, but I think it was the guerrilla poetry campaign that really kind of shifted some things. We had kind of put the flash mobs on pause for a little bit. We were trying to figure out what's the next thing that we could do. I think the next big idea, as people were putting out their individual projects and advancing in their artist careers, but the next big thing that we did together as a crew, and this was really spearheaded by you, was the Guerrilla Poetry Month campaign. Can you talk about just the ideas behind that and what you wanted to accomplish with that campaign?
Not only will I talk about that, we will make Gabriel happy, and I'm gonna show my National Guerrilla Poetry Month video. We'll give y'all a little bit of poetry right now via these. Deny that. National Guerrilla Poetry Month, which, man, this thing took on a life of its own entirely. This ends up going to the U.S. Embassy in Ghana, ends up sharing some of our videos. You know, these go to the AOL Poetry Place Inventor, and you know, these make their way around. And this, you know, we've had entries from Mexico City, we've had entries from South Africa, we've had entries from all over the world. So this is what April normally looks like, not in a pandemic. For ZFG and company, we usually hit up a bunch of poets and we take poetry directly to the people wherever they are.
Attention, fellow human beings. This is an exercise in being human, in consuming something outside of those structures they would not have you recognize as prison. You know, BlackBerry prison, Apple prison, Metro prisons. We're all victims. We sit feet from each other on crowded buses and trains every day with centuries of knowledge and experience between us, and we say nothing. Because we, as a society, are taught to fear each other. Well, guess what? I'm not afraid of you. In fact, I love you all. And not because some God or religion told me to, but simply because I woke up today lucky enough to share the experience of being human with you. Thank you, Sacramento. We're ZFG. It's National Guerrilla Poetry Month. We appreciate you. Can I get a mocha?
Yeah, man. So that's kind of the idea with National Guerrilla Poetry Month. You know, is taking the poems to a location that kind of represents the poem, and then just performing. And then it became, how guerrilla can you get? How wild? How much of a crowded space can you get into? And this became a competition. So year after year, it would become who could do the biggest place, who could do the most crowded place, who would get kicked out of somewhere the fastest. So it's become quite a competition. This year we're still taking it light because of the pandemic. And we definitely want y'all to, like, get yourselves healthy, whatever that looks like for you, and take care of yourselves. But next year we got like 2 years worth of this stored up. So y'all better be ready for like some real big things as far as Guerrilla Poetry Month happens. I'll never forget Ann Cap doing her poem in a shopping cart being pushed through Seafood City in South Sacramento is a legendary one. Our other just veteran guerrilla who will always be in the top 3 just every year without fail, because he's just like that, is Russell Cummings. Russ did a whole thing. We had to run interference to get into the Tower Cafe, and just like got in the middle of Sunday brunch at Tower. It was amazing. And there's another one where me and Russell were filming at Safeway and got asked to leave by security, and Russell jugged him into thinking we were doing a poem about Michelle Obama. So we told him it was for the Obama campaign and we needed to finish it, and he let us. So, Guerrilla Poetry Month, definitely it goes hard, it goes wild, and it's definitely something that started in Sacramento and is an international phenomena as of 2014.
Yeah. It was one of those things for me that really shocked me. Every other day watching it's just amazing video content and submissions coming from all over the world, really connecting poets from all over the world to Sacramento, right? And I know that Sacramento wants to be like this like world-class city, right? I put that in my air quotes. There are people who are trying to figure out what is Sacramento's identity. We even moved from being like the city of trees to the like farm to fort capital or something like that. But at that time, right, having an opportunity for our artists to be recognized on the international level was massive. And it was one of those moments that was really special. I think that you started this journey, right, of like looking at yourself, looking at your role in the community, and you knew that you were being impactful. There were other, I think, parts about yourself that you knew that you still wanted to work on. And I remember you took some time to then start producing. You were always producing, but you were like, no, like I need to get these beats out. And you started producing beats and sounds that were that you wanted to use for meditation, for mindfulness, and for healing. Can you talk a little bit about why that focus on mental health really kind of impacted your creativity in art form?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that's the last few years that's really been the shift for me. I would say since you're talking about the beginning of the ultraviolet era, and that's for me, that's the end of 2018, going through a really public, really hurtful breakup, and just kind of having to put myself back together and realizing that my own self-love wasn't where it needed to be. Even in working with Soul Collective and doing this work, I'd found things to love about myself that other people loved. Like Paul loves that I'm a community organizer and I'm so good a mentor, right? But I still didn't love these things about me. So I start really doing that work, and you hear it in the music. You hear, I get into my own meditation practice. That's where making music for meditation comes in. All of it comes from my own work, like I'm a big one on like, I'm not trying to teach anybody anything until I've learned it myself, so, that whole process of, you know, and you'll remember I took a step back from the crew. Like there's never been anything more scary in my life than having to be like, yo, my mental health isn't good. I need to do some work on me to make sure that my head and my heart are cool. I can't be the leader of this crew. I can't be organizing what we're doing as a collective, you know? So we definitely like, you know, that was one of the roughest moments of my life, having to tell, like, y'all remember how hard it was for me to step away from that, and but getting into my own practice changed everything for me. And so, you know, within that, you know, I get listening to a lot of frequencies. I start doing research on these frequencies and how these frequencies interact with your body. And in that, I start putting these frequencies into the music and playing with that. And then, you know, it was when the pandemic came down. You know, I had this pan drum over here from the homie Nick. Shout out Nick Setnick. Left that drum over here, and I started making, just playing drums at night live for people, because if you needed to breathe, I was having a hard time breathing, and I knew my mental health was struggling. I knew a lot of people's were. So I started just playing at night. And then I was like, man, I can't do this every night. I need to record an album, because people were asking me like, yo, is there a way that I can just play this on my phone? Is there a way that, like, they didn't want to scroll through the Facebook videos. So I started working on that album, and that was the album that I dropped last year. I dropped 2 albums. I dropped the Frequency album, which was, you know, beats and lyrics and music, a lot of instrumentals, a lot of different musical styles. And then I dropped a meditation album that's called Music to Breathe To, and you can find that Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to music. And it's just got a bunch of frequencies and a bunch of pan drum and a bunch of intentions. You know, there, I put a lot of love into that for my people in the middle of all of this, for your mental health to be cool. You know, I just sent that to someone today who posted that, yo, I had a massive anxiety attack. What do I do to bring that down? And so I'm able to give them that medicine now, and to use the music as medicine. And that's man, that's one of the biggest honors of my life, is when people hit me and they're like, yo, I could sleep last night. Yo, my baby got to sleep last night. I had kids, you know what I mean, who like were stressing out because of the pandemic, and they listened to this album, and it helped them sleep. So, you know, that's always huge for me, what I can do for others. And that was a whole ride, man. There's a lot there's 3 years worth of that, of what goes into that meditation album and the work.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is, one, because I think it kind of bookends a little bit where you're at musically right now. But two, I know that very much feels like the end result of this journey that you had started when you kind of moved away from wanting to be this like rapidy rapper, right? With dope music and the whole thing. um and you shifted, right? Like poetry became an outlet, producing became an outlet. There were other things that you wanted to do in the community that became another way, you know, to share your gifts and your talents, which was dope. um you like started to do even more research about forms of poetry, and you kind of created your own style of these like really short poems. And these weren't like haikus, because like we know haikus are short poems, but you were, I think, the master of this style for a second. It was something that we hadn't really seen on the open mic scene, outside of people who were performing like Tony the Haiku Hitman, you know. There was this time where you were doing these short poems, and then you self-published a book called Illicit. Can you talk about finding your style and getting comfortable as a poet? And maybe, I don't know if you have a couple of those pieces kind of off the top of your head, or if you have any of those videos. I know people kind of saw in the opening video, right, that there was a clip where you like read this short poem about cash money, and then you like crumpled it up and you threw it into the audience. So I wondering if maybe you could give some of the people a little bit more of that, either performance and then a little bit of that, the storytelling there.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna have to dig maybe a little bit for the performances. Um,
Well,
but
maybe let's start with like how you develop that style.
yeah, man. So I'd always been a slam poet, so you write for 3 minutes. 3 minutes is the limit. You want to be right under that, and that's how you get it all out. And for me, I had a lot of these, I write every day and every night, and not all of it every night doesn't end up a 3 minute poem. Sometimes it's all garbage except for these 3 lines. And so eventually I just started really digging into these pieces and finding those lines and really trimming the fat and cutting the fat away. And as I started really reading other people's poetry outside of slam, right, more traditional poets, and that was, we talk about the stage and the page as far as poets go. I come from the stage. I'm very comfortable on the stage. I had to learn the page. I'm still learning the page. There's some very accomplished older poets out here who have taken me under their wing and who have acted as elders who are teaching me the page. We all got a lot to learn. So, for me, that was me being like, I want to learn to be a real poet. I don't want to just be a slam poet. I don't ever want people to be able to box me into he's this or he's that. Like, I'm whatever the I want to be. You know what I mean? So that's where that kind of style comes from. And it's really like taking these things and distilling them. I feel like that's what poetry should be. A lot of time, I love slam, but a lot of times y'all gave me 3 minutes that I could have used like the other 2 minutes of that to do something productive, like order a drink. You could have given me 4 sentences that said exactly as much as you did in 3 minutes, and you stretched it out. So where do we find that concentrate of the poetry, so I keep digging into that, and eventually that collection becomes Illicit. Illicit is a book of like 40 or so short poems. I joke with people that you can read it in like one trip to the bathroom, depending on what you ate. But the purpose for it and the kind of the campaign behind it was, and it was a new style. Number one, you saw me reading it, so anytime I read these, I had them wadded up in pockets and wherever I could find. I'd shove them under my hat, and then as I was performing, I would just pull them out of wherever, read them, and then crinkle them up and throw them out at the audience, which was something that I'd never seen anyone do. I've never heard of anyone else doing. And I've had poets, the night that book released, I did a feature with Georgia Mee at Mahogany. Georgia Mee is a hero of mine, absolute hero of mine, amazing poet, and just a very intimidating personality because she's big and she's just powerful. And my first poem that I did, I read it, I wad it up, and I throw it, and I don't look where I throw it, and I hit Georgia Mee in the head. And I was so scared, and it was the first one that I threw out. So I either have this option, because no one knows that's the gimmick. They just think I threw something at Georgia Mee from the stage. So I'm like, yo, I can either just keep it moving and like bulldoze through and act like I didn't just hit Georgia Mee in the head with that, or I can stop the whole show and go apologize to her right now. And I was like, the show must go on. You got to bulldoze through it. And I did. And what was funny was that I never planned on was people called out after 2 or 3, once they realized what I was doing. As soon as I would read a poem, they'd be like, me, can I get that one? And so I would throw it out to that person. And that became kind of the thing with those Illicit poems. And even Georgia Mee at the end of the night was like, I've never seen anything. I told her the whole story of what happened in my head. And she was like, I'm so glad you didn't come and apologize to me. Like, you, boy, I would have ate your lunch if you would have came over and apologized to me. And then, so that book is actually, it's not even a book. It's not bound. It's a bunch of loose leaf pages stuffed in a clear envelope. And the reason for that is it's illicit material. So it used to get left, it went for It went for a nice little dollar amount if you got one of the, especially if you got the first edition of that book. Those are very limited edition, and all of the funds from that book paid for me to print a bunch of copies that got left at dive bar, in dive bar bathrooms, and at coffee shops, and at wherever. I would just leave these little bags of poetry, and if anybody out there in the world of the internet ever found one of those bags, please reach out and tell me the story of which one you found. So yeah, that's the story of Illicit, man, and it's still available on my website at gorillapoet.com. You can pick up a copy of that. It's available in PDF only right now, because we ain't killing any more trees over that book. You know what I mean? I gotta Illicit 2 is on its way. I was hoping to have it done this year, but there's a wild story that half of that book was in a phone that got lost and stolen 2 weeks before the Poet Laureate contest, and that's a whole other.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Yeah.
T asked if I'm the Poet Laureate for 2021. I'm the Poet Laureate for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So, the official lockdown laureate.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you shared a few of those stories and gems in there, because you talked about how you started studying what was on the page, and you had elders kind of guide you to find not only like poets who you could identify with, but just other poetry maybe that you weren't exposed to. I remember talking to you before the Poet Laureate competition about like your preparation and like what that experience was going to be like, because I known that, like, look, in the streets we already like recognize you, like we felt like you earned this title of Gorilla Poet Laureate, like we knew, and maybe the rest of Sacramento didn't know. And I knew that this was one of your goals, and that when you set your attention to stuff, that things will start to work in your favor, right? I've seen it. I've seen you literally like say things and then them come true. It's a wild power to hold and to wield.
You know why, Paul? Because what we do here is magic. Oh, you say you don't believe in magic. I say you're talking when you should be listening. There is no game when we play. You speak with the voice of your ancestors, no matter when your language was stolen. Spirit. More than just a drink at the bar. Love. What we should give more of to the people who create space for this music in their bars. I don't have a hometown, homie. I'm from the stars. There's galaxies behind these eyes, and I will never die as long as we're alive. Don't take it for anything less. What we do here is magic. The voice of the people is sacred, and the music never lies, even when you lie to it. We gotta keep the poetry coming for Gabriel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. That was perfect. That was perfect. I've heard that poem a ton of times, so I know what's up. So there was a lot that went into your preparation, right? Going into that particular competition. And I remember when you started to kind of find like Norse poetry and how that like tied into your heritage. Like you were learning about your culture and Vikings and this whole this is before all the Thor movies came out too. But you were learning about this heritage, and then you started to find it in your writing. Can you talk about what that experience was like? Just like learning a little bit more about your history and background, and then how that was showing up for you in your writing.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
being being so immersed at Soul Collective and so involved in Soul Collective, it really man, it made me hunger for my culture. You know what I'm saying? And really dive into it. And the more work that I did around finding my own culture, the more it comes back to like Celtic folks and Vikings, Celtic folks and Norse folks. And for me, like my family goes back to Germany and England, right? So there's a lot of that like Norse culture that I've always like since I've started diving, that's the culture that I identify with, right? That's in my bloodline. Um, and, I think for a lot of folks who look like me, right, it's so important that we realize I'm not white, right? Like there is no white landia. I'm German, I'm English, I have a culture. We were given white is the destroyer of cultures for us too. You know what I mean? So it's so important for us to go back and learn about our own cultures and incorporate that into our creativity. So yeah, I start digging into Norse poetry in different styles, and there's this style called Lodioter. I'm butchering that terribly, but I'm doing what I can. They stole my language. So I start trying to follow this format, and there's internal things. It's not A, B, A, B. It's very non-European. There's internal things that match to each other, but there's a rhythm that's established to it through that's very interesting. And once I dug deeper into it, I realized this is how I write. This is you find that same pattern in my writing. There's a flow to the way that I write when I perform and when I'm on the page. There are two kind of different formulas to them, and I found both of these formulas in this ancient Norse poetry where I'm like, yo, I write like that naturally, but it's because it's in my blood. You know what I'm saying? Like the trauma is not the only thing that's handed down generationally. We like to talk a lot about that, but we don't talk about the generational gifts that are handed down and the generational knowledge and wisdom that are handed down. So for me, it was huge. Like not only for me personally, but also for me to be able to tell other white folks and explain this idea of digging into our own cultures. I think a lot of us are scared to dig into our cultures because if we celebrate, we all know what Irish pride means. You know what I mean? I grew up with white kids scribbling that on their shoes. It wasn't because they were proud to be Irish, right? They were racist. So there's, a lot of, it gets a little weird for us sometimes as white folks to celebrate our culture. So I definitely want to be one of those examples of like how we can really celebrate our cultures as white folks, especially through the arts and especially through creativity. All of our ancestors had rhythms. All of our ancestors had stories and oral traditions. So, I think that's one of the beautiful things is, where my culture had bards and Fili and all of these, there were 7 different levels of storyteller in the Celtic tradition, where like West African folks had griots, and we learn from each other's histories and ancestries around this art and the way that storytelling and poetry have evolved. Is always such a huge thing to me, and everybody being able to go back to their culture and not this thing we've been handed that isn't actually culture.
Yeah. And I was there in the room. There was space in the room for some like guests to come and observe. The panels and the performances, the presentations of the finalists for the Poet Laureates. And I was in the room for yours, and I was there for some of the conversation, and we'll get to a little bit about that. But you did this poem that day that I think really uh, kind of signaled to me about how like wild and divine and like this like manifesting power, right? That you wield. It's pretty special, and it's because I know this story, right? That I wanted to bring it up. You did this poem. That was something I hadn't even heard yet, so I knew it was like brand new. But can you talk to the folks about uh, what that poem was, when it started for you, and what that whole situation was? I know you talked about losing your phone like a couple of weeks before
Man,
that day, and maybe you can even share that poem. I don't know if you have that poem offhand, but it would be
yeah,
great, I think, for you to perform that too. Just
yeah,
tell us that story and what that moment really meant for you, and then we'll talk about all the stuff that happens after. But like leading up to that point,
for sure,
what
for
was
sure.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, man, I love it, T. I love to see it. Um, so I write primarily on my phone. My elder hates that about me. He yells at me for it constantly. But that's just where I usually write. I write on my computer, on my phone. I'd been writing on my phone for the last year and a half, probably. And so it comes up, it's time for the Poet Laureate finals. You're going to perform 2 pieces. And 2 weeks before the Poet Laureate finals, my phone got stolen with every poem that I had written for the last year and a half on it. It was completely heartbreaking. I was like, okay, I'm done here. You know what I mean? Like, I have a few that I know off the top of my head, but like, I couldn't go back. I didn't have the ability to like sort through and be like, this is the one right here. Like, I had very limited options, including one poem I had written. And we lost someone. That was 2019, right? No, it was 2020. It was January 1st, 2020. We found out that a just brother to the hip hop community out here named Ali Trotter had taken his own life, and it really messed a lot of people up in the hip hop community. I won't pretend that he and I were exceptionally close, but we saw each other all the time at shows. We always talked. We always had a conversation. He always showed love. I always showed it back, and I think that was his relationship with a lot of people in this city. He was the textbook definition of a hip hop fan. He came to everyone's shows. Like, he would give you the raw, real opinion on what your art was. So, in watching my community be hit so hard and being affected myself, I wrote this poem, and it's called Donuts. And I decided that I was going to do that poem for the Poet Laureate finals. And a couple days before, I start feeling like, yo, I don't have the right poems. Like, I start second guessing myself. And, I start talking to what I like to call my higher ups. And I'm like, yo, can I just get a sign? Like, if these are the right poems, can I get a sign? Like, I need a grandiose gesture that's like, you have the right poems, take these in. It doesn't matter to me if I win or not, but I'm supposed to do what I'm supposed to do. So if these are the right poems, just let me know. So I wake up the morning of the Poet Laureate finals, and it is Jay Dilla's birthday. And for those of you who don't study hip hop culture, Jay Dilla is famous for an album called Donuts. So it is known as Dilla Day. It's Donut Day. Like, it's literally all signs are pointing to donuts. And this is the poem that I have. And that's the poem that I do. And it's the first time that I'd ever done it in public. Tonight, actually, I'll share it with you. And this will be the first time that I've ever done it in a public setting and like for the public, but that was such a wild, like, tell. It was that tap on the shoulder that was like, yo, we're here with you. You're not alone. You know what I mean? And I really felt like, I told folks, like, I'm bringing the homie with me today. I'm bringing Ali into this with me today, because he would have loved to see that. You know what I mean? He would have loved to see his rapping ass homeboy, up for Poet Laureate in my blazer. You know what I'm saying? Like, So I definitely brought him into the room, and I feel like that was a big part. You know what I mean? Some of the energies that I brought in the room with me that day, I feel like are definitely part of the reason that I have this title now. And the reason that I won by whatever tiny margin I can imagine that it was over Patrice, because man, that's something else that needs to be stated while we
Oh,
talking about.
we'll get there. We'll get there. But this
But
is
you want the tone.
everything
But
kind
you
of
want the tone
leading
first.
up to that moment for you.
Word.
Yeah.
So let me give you this poem
Mhm.
for the folks who are tuning in for the poetry and don't want to just hear me tell my life story right now. It goes like this. Think of a wonderful thought, any tiny little thought. Think of all the joy you'll find when you leave the world behind. And I want that. We sat in my backyard 2 days after Ali killed himself and decided that the only joy she could find in the wake of a nightmare was donuts. 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 Focus on the donuts. I'm a chocolate old-fashioned guy myself, but I don't know what enough of my friends' favorite donuts are, and I want to know what kind of donuts to bring you when those hard days ambush you and the weight you've been carrying collapses on itself. I am comfortable sitting in rubble silently. I will bring donuts to keep us company. Now think of the happiest things. It's the same as having wings. Let's all try it just once more. Look, we're rising off the floor. Donuts. Donuts. Like Jay Dilla. Like classic hip hop. Just like Ali. A reminder that a hole in the middle can be surrounded by the most delicious flavors. Thanks, y'all.
It's such a powerful piece. And I think about that day, and I'll tell this part of it so that you don't have to. Seeing the judges really kind of debate that day, hearing the arguments for, against, and I'll tell you the finalists were really, it just came down to a couple people, you and Patrice, and it was like this close. If y'all can see, it was like that close. And it really kind of represented this shift of, you know, the traditional poet who typically like writes for the page. That's where their poetry lives, is in books. You think about your career, I think about the work that Patrice has done, where you're mentoring, you're in the streets, you're giving back, you're creating opportunities, right? For this next generation. Y'all were both such strong leaders. Could have gone either way. But I think about that moment, and then when they decided to give it to you, um, it wasn't a tie, right? But it was very close. It wasn't a tie. But I think about that moment, and then I knew everything that you had been through to kind of get to that point. I knew, you know, I love Patrice, 20 plus years, like in it. I understand that journey too. But I'm closer to you. Like I know Mama Patrice through just, you know, working with young poets and through SES and community. But you and I have literally been like hand in hand in a lot of this stuff. So to see that moment for you, where then you found out and you knew, I knew how transformational it would be. Did you? Did you really have that understanding of um what that new title of, like, not just the Guerrilla Poet Laureate represented by the streets, but now, your title's the Sacramento Poet
Right.
Laureate, like, for the city. Um, did you know how transformational that would be for your life?
You know, I think it took me a while to realize, but I will say that it started before I won. Just in that process that you were talking about, going through that with Patrice, like it, I cannot say enough about my sister Patrice. I actually wrote one of her letters of recommendation to be poet laureate. Like, I would have been completely happy losing to Patrice, and I'm pretty sure that's what I wrote exactly in that letter. Um, but when I was watching, they had one final, and then they had to have another one. And the reason they had to have another one is because it couldn't be judged the way that it had always been judged. Because me and Patrice are different poets than have ever been involved, right? And the fact that, I tell folks all the time that had there not been two of us, I don't think it would have been either of us. You know what I mean? Had I been in that
Mhm.
competition by myself against the more traditional folks, then I think it would have gone to them. I think it's easy to say he's a slam artist or whatever, and kind of dismiss it. Where because there was two of us, and two of us that have such heavy resumes and such community service and community backing, that changed everything. They had to judge it differently. They had to consider us, and they don't have to consider me. They had to consider us, and that's when I realized, the transformation that we were all making together. Because I've been working with Patrice and Says, the Says kids like age out of their program and come over to ZFG half the time. So when I watched that happen, I realized, like, yo, we're really transforming how this whole process works, who they give these titles to, what the qualifications even are. So that was huge. And then, it's pretty much as soon as they name me poet laureate, it's not like a month before we're all in lockdown. So I still haven't really had the experience of being a poet laureate. I mean, I haven't gone and done public anything. All of my stuff has been Zoom or virtual. I got an amazing mentor as far as being a laureate out of Stockton named Tama, and Mama Tama. I was talking to her about 8 months into my laureateship, and I said, I'm having a hard time writing right now. And she said, oh, nobody told you? I said, what? She said, you can't write for the first year that they give you that title because it's so intimidating and nothing sounds laureate-ish enough, right? And I definitely found that, and I'm far more intentional with what I write now. But for me, the laureateship has been less about, I state it all of the time, and I would love to go on. We got as many people as we got watching right now. Let me declare publicly, I'm not the best poet in Sacramento. I'm not even in the top 5. You know what I mean? Like, as far as the poetry that I create, I'm not down in myself. I'm a great poet, but I'm not the best in Sacramento. Who I am is the person that loves poetry more than anyone else in this city. Try me. You know what I mean? Like, I will sit in a jail cell for this poetry. You know what I mean? And I've proved that. So for me, my work as a laureate is about uniting all of the poetry in Sacramento, is about connecting the young people to the elders and helping each one of them understand what the other has to offer them. I come from a very intergenerational, multicultural space at Soul Collective, so I've seen it work. I've bared witness to it for the last 11 years, that this is how we heal. This is how we build. This is how we create joy. This is how we understand each other. This is how we smash racism. This is how we smash the patriarchy, is through these multi-generational, multicultural spaces where we connect and understand each other. So that's really like my goal as Laureate, is less about, I want y'all to y'all are gonna hear my words. Like, I got books, I got a website, you could come and see it, but like I'd rather, see. One of the things that I got to really facilitate this year that was dope was I got to hook the youth poet laureates up with the Sacramento Poetry Center. And so this month, for Poetry Month, the Poetry Center their social media has been taken over by the youth poet laureates, who will be providing all the content. That's beautiful. That's what the Poetry Center was designed to do by the elders who created it. You know what I'm saying? Like, those elders, the people who created that space, are my elders' elders. You know what I mean? This is legacy. We're talking about the legacy of someone like Jose Montoya. I take that very seriously. You know what I mean? And I think we're doing an amazing job, a year in, to really bring unity, even though we can't even go out and we can't even be amongst each other. We're creating unity, we're creating relationships, and we're creating a network that really supports young poets in this city from all over the city. You know what I mean? Every neighborhood, we have safe spaces being built where if your neighborhood and your neighborhood don't get along, y'all could come here and be good. You know what I mean? So that's definitely the whole mission with what I'm trying to do as Poet Laureate, and how I'm trying to use this title, is to really kick open some doors for the young people and for people who don't share the same privileges that I do.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And we saw it on the street corners with events like the intersection, where you had that multi-generational audience that would come in and share their gifts, share their words with each other. And we're seeing it in the virtual space through your work now. So I want to applaud you for that too. I know we're going to see a lot more from you, but I'm really excited, man, about this new series, the Young Laureates. And I was hoping that you could share. I know I kind of opened it a little bit, but what your goal is for this interview series and the people that you selected to kind of kick it off with. Can you talk about some of these individuals and what people can expect and look forward to from some of those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. It was brought to my attention. I won laureate, and I'm the youngest poet laureate in Sacramento history by a long shot. And after I won, it was made every time that a young laureate was nominated after me, someone came and told me, yo, did you hear about Richmond, Virginia just nominated Roscoe Burnhams as their poet laureate? Yo, did you? And Georgina actually reached out to me. She's a Native woman from Lake County that's their laureate out there. And we've got to share some really cool spaces as young laureates. She was like one of the first people who really, like, we kind of buddied up and we're like, okay, you're young, I'm young, you about social justice, you think Walt Whitman was a racist too? All right, word, like, we got each other's backs. So, being able to build with her, and then she's connected to a lot more of the laureates past. So she's been kind of gaming me up and getting me into those networks as well. It was kind of funny because there is a list of laureates. And when you win, they add you to this list, and there's a network and all of this. They could not find me because no one currently on the list, no one knew how to get a hold of me. I don't run in academic circles. So they weren't aware of where to even come and find me, which I think is beautiful. You know what I mean? That's some guerrilla poet laureate shit. Like, find me on the street corner. It's the mission with this is definitely to introduce, it's welcome to the Renaissance. It's a welcome to the Renaissance because the arts are changing. This is what happens historically after pandemics. Consistently, go look at history. Renaissance follows. We've all just sat for a year and really thought about the possibilities and the way that the world's working, and how was it really working for us? Was it really working for us? Because I think it could change, and I think this generation thinks it could change, and the generation behind us definitely thinks it's time for change. The idea of this series is to really highlight not only the work of these young poets and these young laureates, but to really just push these ideas and have these ideas. You know, a salon originally was a place for artists to discuss their ideas, and not even just artists, historians, scientists, mathematicians, all could come to the salon and we discuss ideas, and we you know, what the elder calls reasoning, right? And so the Poetry Salon, the Sacramento Poetry Salon, was built as a space for that. And it's also, you know, this is also welcome to our folks who are from outside of Sacramento. You know what I mean? Come and find the Sacramento Poetry Salon. We've got contests going on right now. Every event going on in Northern California about poetry, we try to broadcast. Poetry videos, whatever people are doing. You're going to see some guerrilla poetry stuff pop up this month. So just the idea of like really providing a platform to these young voices, and especially everyone other than me is a young person of color. You know, and that's always going to be the mission, is to amplify young people of color. And these people are so powerful with the words they're saying, and the content they're creating, but also just the missions that they're on, and the movements that they're leading themselves. You know, I've been watching.
Yeah.
I've been watching Tongo out in SF, and just the massive amount of work that he's doing, and being out there, and then combining with Damani, and they got a little music project going on. I'm so excited about that, to talk to them about that. And then, you know, something else to look forward to, y'all. Some of y'all don't know this. Y'all know Amanda Gorman, but you don't know that we have our own youth poet laureate who is up in the running to take Amanda Gorman's place as National Youth Poet Laureate, and that's Alexandra Nguyen. So I think she's on the 22nd. So we're gonna be yeah, man. We Cloudy been doing work with the Black Artist Fund. We're gonna talk to Cloudy. There's just some incredible folks. All of them just have nothing but my undying respect. So I'm really excited to get down to the brass tacks with them and find out, like, if it's as weird for them as it is for me to be a young laureate. You know, like, was there pushback from the older poets in your city? Was there, what challenges have you faced that you don't think that, you know, a 60-plus-year-old academic professor who is the poet laureate faces? You know, it's definitely a different set of challenges for us, but I think all of us are up to it.
Yeah, it's dope, man. It's dope. It's such an incredible idea. I think about just the national attention that poets like our good friend Brandon Leake, who won America's Got Talent, like Amanda Gorman doing the poem at the inauguration. I think about those stories and those types of journeys, and how, you know, our country is really starting to wake up to some of these voices. These voices have always been here. These experiences have been here. I appreciate the platform to get to know these individuals a lot deeper. So I'm really looking forward to the show to kind of hear about their work and how they're transforming spaces. Because as everybody's had an opportunity here tonight, that's really what you've been about your entire career, right? Resisting against people and institutions who are telling you that you can't, and then showing them otherwise, right? And it hasn't been an easy path. It's definitely not an easy journey. But having the opportunity to do that through collective power and gaining kind of guidance and wisdom from your mentors and from your elders, and then passing that information on to the youth. Whether you hit the big goal that you've been striving for, or not, you actually end up ending in the place where you were meant to be, where you were supposed to be. So I just wanted to thank you, man, because I know this has been a long interview, so in a huge chunk of your time, but thank you for allowing me to do this interview with you. I've heard a lot of these stories, but I feel like not a lot of people get to know you as deeply and as intimately as we kind of gotten to tonight. So I hope people really, you know, give this full kind of hour, 40 minutes or so, an opportunity to really get to know you better. Your work in the community is really powerful, man, and I appreciate it. look forward to more opportunities, and hopefully we'll be able to hang out in the same space pretty soon. So
Yeah, man. Soon enough, we're gonna. I've been really fantasizing and slash strategizing on. There's an alley here in Sacramento that is home to the crew. Shout out Norma Stay. It's the alley on 9th and I called Artist Alley. And I think when y'all see me out in public again, that's where you're gonna see me first. I miss the venues. I miss my people at Cafe Colonial like you wouldn't believe. Um, and over at Soul Collective and all the spots. But I can't wait to be out on the street corner again with my people, and with the people, so that's definitely like in the works for me. Before we get out of here, I want to leave folks with one more poem, and it's the
I was
poem.
gonna ask you to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But go for it, man. Close us out with a piece. I know that Gabriel and everyone at home looking forward to it. It doesn't have to be a brand new piece, but something that's that you're really proud of right now.
Man, I'm gonna give y'all something new. This got written last week. Or not last week. What am I talking about? Last year. Hold on, I'm trying to read through comments as well. Let me get to these comments real quick before I dive into this. T says, I'm 49 years old and just starting my poetry career. I hope to get published someday. Hearing that the scene here in Sac is multi-generational makes me feel I can make it in Sacramento. I respect all poets, young, my generation, and definitely the people that came before me. Some of our elders of top poetry classes I have attended. Yo, T, you can definitely make it in Sacramento. We are personally inviting you out. Like, go find the Sacramento Poetry Salon page. We've got stuff going on right there, and we'll also be publishing places for folks to get published. That's definitely been a thing for me as well, was like working to get published. I didn't know how to do that. So we're definitely working on some of those kind of workshops and just like the resource list for where people can get published. Because we want to make sure that all of our young poets are getting published too. You know what I mean? So shout out T. We really appreciate you. Thank you. And my last last comment of the night, my guy Benoit from the Element Brass Band, and just his and BTU Arts and that's our guy right there. ZFG and Element Brass Band go like this, and especially BTU Arts. They do something called the Instrument Petting Zoo, where we would do the poetry and the open mic, and then they would bring out the instruments and let the kids try those out. And it just, man, it was some of the most fun that we've ever had. Actually, I think I got a video of one of those I might play us out with for this. But yeah, man, Benoit, we definitely going to get back to it. And you're very welcome, T. We look forward to seeing you. I'm going to give y'all this poem. This was my favorite poem that I wrote last year, probably the most powerful to me, one of the most powerful. I wrote a couple pieces I'm really proud of last year, but this one is definitely from last year. I think you can tell from the opening lines. But I just had this real understanding come to me that World War III wasn't gonna be the U.S. versus another country, and it wasn't going to be this civil war that people were talking about, but the World War III was love versus fear. And it goes like this. World War III is love versus fear, and we don't even have the right words. We're just making way for the ones who do. You, who deserve so much more than justice, than liberation, who are worth so much more than freedom. They don't hear me, Paul. These are such small words. See, freedom comes with a need to be freed from. They have deemed peace something to keep rather than something to give away. Something about the divine and balance feels closer. Holy Father, we pray. Holy Father, we pray. Holy Father, don't you ever forget how holy my mama is. My friend Harley says the reconciliation is being live streamed in real time, and that word found home in my bones. Revolutions happen daily, however televised. I don't want to be revolving when I leave here. I want to be reconciled. We are answering the equation of us, struggling with the remainders, grasping at words just past our tongues. These kids don't need our letters to spell. They understand. Mouths don't always call the same name. Hearts do. Let them pray with their own tongues and watch how ancient the dances get. These kids know the right words aren't words at all, but notes and rhythm and harmony. Thank y'all. And
That was dope.
I figured I gotta drop something even you ain't heard yet. You know what I mean?
I'm messing with it, man. I'm messing with it for sure. So for all of y'all at home, I know Andrew's gonna play us out with another video. My name is Paul Willis. If you want to holler at me, you can find me at Paul Willis is Hip Hop. That's everything. My Instagram, my Facebook, my Cash App, my Venmo, my Gmail. There's no middle manager here. If you want to get a hold of me, then you can reach me directly. Just Paul Willis is Hip Hop on all of those social media platforms. Feel free to reach out. T, hope to see you at the Sacramento Poetry Salon. And my brother Andrew, thank you so much for your time, man. I know you're going to play us out, but I just wanted to express my gratitude and appreciation.
Man, it's always love. I can't think of anybody I'd rather do this interview with. You know, at the Poetry Salon, we're trying to not only provide a live platform, but a living history. So, you know, hopefully this goes down and some of the future generations are able to watch it and really learn. You know, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have help me out with that. And, you know, in a really nice segue, we're also going to hear a little bit of Paul Willis music to intro this. So make sure you go check out that new Wonderland album that is available from my brother Paul. And we are going here. This is the most open mic in the city at Roy J. Nielsen. We got Benoit out there with the Bigger Than Us band. We had Coco out there with the dancers. We had the whole community out at this one. And this is one of the best representations of what we do at ZFG. Y'all, I'm Andru Defeye. That's Paul Willis. And we love you. And you can't do nothing about it.
Give me love. Give me life. Give me love.
Tell me, can you feel, 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 move your feet and dance. Tell me, can you feel the love? Move your feet and dance. Tell me, can you feel the love? Move your feet and dance. Tell me, can you feel the love? Would you be